An interesting area historically, whatever era you look at, from the days when the Indians came back here for their acorn harvest and on trading trips off to other villages across the desert. The Spanish explorers and missionaries passed very close through this country and of course changed the lives of the Indians forever. But the real history of Lost Valley begins with the days of the cattlemen in the 1800s. The first cattlemen back here were apparently a couple of brothers named Stone, Jim and John Stone. Jim Stone is in fact who gave Lost Valley its name back, along about 1880 or thereabouts. I don't know exactly where the name come from. I always had this image of Jim riding along with the cows and someone saying, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Oh, I'm going to that Lost Valley back up on the other side of Warner's." So at any rate, he came up with a good name for the place, because as you come back in here, it really is kind of a lost valley, really isolated back in here, and kind of an unusual spot to see with the trees and the meadows and the streams back here that you don't find in the hill country around here for the most part. It was good cattle land, summer range mostly, bring them up in April, bring them down in November. In fact, they were still doing cattle drives into this country on into the 1950s. At that time, a family named Bergman owned the land. Henry Bergman bought some land here from the Stones, and then his son Arlie was here and built the old cabin that's still standing today back in 1915, packed all the materials for that cabin in on the backs of burros, homesteaded back here, along with his wife, Annie, who's, well, just about 93 now, still around today. And then after Arlie died, his son Ray Bergman was the third generation of the family to run cattle back here, and he kept on running cattle clear on into the 1950s. But he knew that Southern California was changing then, and if he was going to stay in the cattle business, which he wanted to, he needed to get himself someplace else, preferably Montana. Well, some other people knew that Southern California was changing then also, and those were the men who ran the old Orange Empire Council of the Boy Scouts of America. They had a summer camp then. It was called Camp Rokelai. Opened up back in 1922 up in the Barton Flats part of the San Bernardino Mountains. Consisted of all of about 11 acres of land, named for the three service clubs that helped to start the camp up, the Rotarians, the Kiwanis, and the Lions. Well, they could see that as Orange County was growing in the 1950s, Rokelai just wasn't going to be a viable summer camp for too much longer. So they formed a committee and started looking around Southern California for another summer camp for the Orange County Scouts. They tried up in the San Bernardinos some more and down around Julian, and didn't really find what they were looking for. And along coming back on one of those trips, somehow, just by accident as best as I can tell, they ran into Ray Bergman down in the little cafe in Awanga. And they got talking to him and somehow found out about this land that he had that might be for sale. And I think more than anything else, it was the name that attracted them at first, Lost Valley. They thought they'd have a look at that. So Ray brought him in here on the old road, just a real Jeep trail, grinding along one winter. There's snow on the ground, and coming back in, creeping through the hills here, looking at this scrubby chaparral country. These scouters are sitting there thinking, we don't want any part of this. You can't get into this place. You couldn't get in materials to build or electricity. This is a mistake. Now that old road came into Lost Valley from the northwest and makes a ridge, and all of a sudden the entire valley, boom, is just spread out below you like a picture postcard. And they look down into the valley and the meadows here and the oak and the pine and the cedars and the creeks meandering through, and they were sold. They'd figure out how to get back here. They'd figure out how to get the supplies in, electricity, all those things. This was the camp they'd been looking for, a piece of real wilderness. And that's how the Scouts came to buy this land. That was 1959. Of course, there was a lot to be done. Wells had to be drilled, a new road built, buildings built, and of course that meant raising money. It took about 5 years until finally in 1964 we were able to open for our first season of summer camp. Opened what was then called Camp Anza, what we now call Camp Grace. A few years later, they opened a second camp, Camp Borrego. We call it Camp Irvine now. And since 1979, we've run as a two-camp, a real scout reservation, with camps Irvine and Grace running a full week of program.